adjust your level of thick skin to accommodate the budget that you have available. There's no wrong budget. That's important to know as well. Obviously, bigger budgets over time will get bigger results, but a big budget only gets good results if it has the foundation of a good campaign.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by IndiePRO.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I'm your host, Jack McCarthy, and this is episode 262. With me is my awesome co-host, Mr. Ed Isola. Ed, what's up, dude?
Kicking it, feeling good, ready to get into it, and in focus. So that's important.
I'm excited to dive into a topic that we get a lot of questions about, and honestly, I see a lot of misinformation, a lot of questions about online, kind of going around on social media. There's a ton of people talking about how to run ads on social media if you are an artist, if you're a musician, if you're in a band, and I think that we've gotten to a point in the world, in the social sphere, about advertising where there's some information out there that's just not really that good or not really that well practiced is maybe a more politically correct way of saying you can't always trust what you hear on the internet. So we were excited in this episode to kind of talk about some advertising tips for social media advertising, specifically for artists and bands, that you can learn from our agency and our agency team at IndieX, where we're constantly running ads for our artist clients day in, day out. It's all that we do. And bring some tips to you guys that are relevant to right now to help you kind of avoid some of the pitfalls and maybe some of the bad advice that's out there, and kind of pull in from the brain trust of our team. So we asked the whole IndieX team for some tips that they would give to musicians, artists that are advertising maybe for the first time, maybe for people that have done it for a long time and have been further along in their journey, for artists that are just getting started out, for artists that are a little more tenured and seasoned, some tips that they might give that kind of address a myriad of different kinds of situations. And I was really excited about some of the answers and ideas that we got, pretty varied across the whole team. So we're going to run them down with you guys here today and give you some advice that you could probably only get from a music marketing agency that's running ads constantly, day in, day out. I feel like my eyes are burning from looking at Ads Manager too often, and I know that sometimes the rest of the team feels that way too. So we're going to run down some of our biggest tips and tricks when it comes to advertising, and I'm super excited.
Same. I think that's a really good place to start, though, because things in advertising change, right? People are aware of that. But a lot of the information that I see online currently is information that was correct at one point. Most of the information was correct at one point. And I think what's really valuable about this is that this information is a week old, right? So these are the things that are working now. And wasn't like we asked the team in 2020, what did you like to do? It's like, hey, what are you currently doing that you see work? And so I think that's something that hopefully gives a little bit of credibility to what we're about to go through. It's recent, current, and stuff you can put into practice immediately and, expect it to work if you follow the principles, versus stuff that maybe takes a long time to create a course and it's 2 years old once you finally learn about it. So try to give you what is currently working.
Yeah, well said. And I think we're talking about a much larger sample size than I did this for my artist project and it worked, so it should work for you. We're talking about hundreds of artist accounts that we've managed, hundreds of artists at this point over many, many years, and a lot of combined experience amongst our whole agency team and the work that we do in the ads platforms, whether it's the Meta platforms, Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, Google Ads with YouTube and things like that. So kind of spanning a whole bunch of different ideas here, and I hope that it's valuable to you guys, and maybe we'll answer some questions that you've had and either were too afraid to ask or couldn't find reliable information out there. And hopefully this gives you something that you can listen to, and we can timestamp it as this is what's working right now, and maybe maybe a year from now, the things that we're going to recommend here don't necessarily hold true. But I think there's also some evergreen tips that we're going to get into as well that kind of are true, regardless of what kind of changes are happening in an ads platform. So let's get into it. Where do we want to start?
I think we put a list together before this. I think we run down the list, but I think we flip flop the first two now that I'm reading them. So let's start with what Andy was saying, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, sure. So this tip comes from one of our IndieX account strategists and marketers, Andy. If you've listened to Creative Juice before, you've heard him on the podcast. We'll link to the most recent episode that we had Andy on, where we were talking about just a few weeks ago, talking about one of our client accounts and some of the results that we were seeing with them. We'll make sure to link back to that in the show notes. So what Andy said was kind of applying to a holistic point of view when it comes to your advertising. Andy said, think about how your advertising works for different parts of your fan base. Split your campaigns up according to your audiences. Think about your potential fans that have never heard of you. Think about people that know of you but aren't a diehard fan. And then think about your diehard fans. And then when you start classifying people into these three categories, you'll get a better idea of working out how to move people from one stage to another. And I think, in my opinion, this is a good kind of starting point of one of those evergreen sort of tips that I think apply regardless of what changes are happening in an ads platform, and really just kind of gives you a nice picture of what you can be thinking about when it comes to running ads for your music.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about this is it seems like it's a super simple tip, but it's actually something that probably took Andy 3-5 years to learn. Like, it's something that took me a long time to learn, and probably the same for you, Jack. It's like, when you start off marketing, you just kind of start off in this place where you're like, let me just put my information out there. But if you can keep this in mind, it's a really great thing, because you're starting at an advantage of like, hey, let me put my stuff out there, but let me adjust the way that the message is presented to different groups of people. And obviously the pools of your different fans, whether it's they don't know you, they've heard of you, but they're not a super fan, or like, here's your diehard fans. The way you can present those messages, the same piece of content, can be so different. And just that slight tweak is so important. And so keep that in mind wherever you're at with your marketing, that the pools of your audience size in those three sections will be different. And ideally over time, they're going to continue to grow, especially the I've heard of you and I'm a super fan. Those are the ones that will grow. But it really is a great tip. Like you said, it's evergreen too, because no matter where you are in your career, if you're just starting or you're 10 years into it, like I said, you'll have different size audiences there, but it's the same idea and the same principle, where if you have a new video, you can present it to the people who don't know you with kind of like a, like a catchphrase, like clickbaity type headline. That's like, oh, looks cool. This sounds interesting. Watch it. Then you present it to your super fans early, like, hey, I want to give you first access to this. And so understanding this allows you to open up a lot of different doors down the road that I think gives you a leg up, especially as you start understanding this, that I wish I would have known this at the start. It's a really great tip from Andy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, and I think that's one approach to thinking about it in terms of how you advertise to different subsets of your fan base, or, your potential fan base, but also in addition to the messaging, what you're actually trying to accomplish with those ads, whereas with people that you're trying to get potential fans, new fans, cold traffic, you're trying to get them aware of you, paying attention to you for the very first time. And I think that's where a lot of artists get stuck when we audit ad accounts, even for artists that are massive. They get stuck there, and that's the only thing they do. And there's so many things that you can take advantage of once you've got an audience. So those people that, maybe they are aware of you, but they're not necessarily a diehard fan yet, you want to make sure that you're running ads to continue to show them content, and maybe not just, push the same thing on them over and over and over again. Make sure that they're seeing, the stuff that you're putting out. Make sure that your social media posts are reaching them so that they're being nurtured and kind of pulled further and further into your world. You want to be working to get them onto your email list, get them onto your text list. You could be using ads to do that. And of course, you want to be trying to sell to people. And all of these different objectives or goals of an ad campaign fit into these different types, different pockets of your fan base. And we could go deep into the buddy system and talk about, the various stages of the fan customer journey. But if you want to look at it from just these three stages, that's a really, really solid tip.
Yeah, and it really allows you to have a starting place, like you're saying, where it's not just having people in these buckets, it's learning over time how to move them from not knowing you to being a super fan. And that sentence in itself, right? That's the whole point of marketing is how do I take somebody from not knowing me to being a fan, buying a ticket, coming to a show, buying merchandise.
Screaming from the rooftops about you.
Right. That feels if someone comes to you and says, "Hey, can you take these people who don't know about you and move them into superfan?" It's a very hard process, but understanding that there's different steps and different levels that allow you to move through. Like Jackson, you can take a deep dive. You can go listen to the episodes on the buddy system or read about it that will help you understand that more. But just understanding that as a baseline, literally just writing on a piece of paper, like here's my 3 sections, it at least gives you the framework with which to start taking steps versus just like, let me throw it all at the wall in absolute chaos. So I think that's a great tip from Andy. And I think that that is a really great starting point because it is a high level, broad, evergreen topic. It's like no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, here's how you kind of start um, with that, with your marketing. And so I think a great one that is maybe a little bit more specific right now and something that's changed over the last few years is Shay's tip, if you want to jump into that one.
Yeah, this is a great one because I think it addresses a question and an assumption that a lot of people have about running ads online. And Shay, one of our IndieX account managers and Indie founder coaches, she brought this tip to us and said, don't try too hard to control your targeting. In a lot of cases, broader is better. Machine learning knows how to match your content, your messaging to the users on a platform better than you do. This is like a hotly contested, thing. Like, oh, we know better than the machine, or it sucks that the targeting options that we used to have in front of us are taken away. But I think this is a really good tip because right now we're in a place where more and more of the options that you might have had to target, for example, on the meta platforms, are no longer in existence. So that super niche indie band or that super niche hip hop group or rapper that you loved and that you feel like your fans are his fans or their fans, you probably aren't able to target them anymore. And really now, in a lot of cases with the Meta platform, with TikTok, and even with Google, we're working with much, much broader categories of targeting options. And there are ways to start thinking about, and we'll get into this in a second tip here related to targeting, because a little spoiler alert, your content is actually your best targeting. We'll get into that in a second, but broader truly is better. You can work with larger audience sizes, and then you can really, you're kind of forced to dial in on your message and your content. It truly separates kind of the boys from the men, so to speak, in terms of what you can actually do with your ads. Now you're not just throwing up a whatever video and, super tightly targeting the perfect audience. We're working with broader sets now, bigger audiences, and, your message is more and more important here. And because of that, the machine can learn and put your content in front of the right people.
It's so crazy because this is the opposite, really, of when I was first learning about marketing. This is kind of what we were talking about where things change. And this is one of those things that changes where early on it was literally like you could target these specific bands that you like. And there still are some bands you can target, but like Jack's saying, a lot of that is going away and it's being replaced with genres and broad interest targeting and things like that. And as you also said, we're going to get into kind of what the solution to that is, but understanding that you almost don't have to now take as much time to sit and put together. You still want to understand at the core who your fan is, but you don't have to sit and put together like I'm targeting this band and this band and this band and this band. You can just kind of say like, here's my core fan. They like folk music. I'm going to target folk music, right? Or like I'm a rapper. Let me target rap, or let me target underground rap, or pop music. But really, outside of that, going much deeper is almost detrimental to you now because you're going to really narrow down your audience based off of what Facebook's allowing you to target. And it's just crazy because that's, like I said, it's the opposite, but it's something that people need to be aware of. And if you're listening to this being like, oh, well, I thought it was like target the bands that sound like you. It's like, well, it was that, But it's something that if you're not trying this, it's worth trying and comparing to what you're doing, because you might find that you get better results. I think that's what everybody at IndieX, in terms of like on the team that's been testing it, has been finding, is that this broader approach works, but it only works because of what the next tip is, like Jack was saying, which I guess we'll just jump into from Jesse, was that your content and your promise will do more legwork than the actual campaign setup will.
That's just like a truth bomb now, I think, these days when it comes to advertising. And we had Jesse on the podcast a few weeks back to talk about Indie Founder and a lot of the results that he's seeing with our Indie Founder clients regarding driving traffic over to streaming and kind of the campaign structures and setups that we're using related to that. I'll make sure we link to that in the show notes so that you can go back and check it out, because there's some really important takeaways from that episode related to this. But really what Jesse is getting into here, and Ed actually gave a similar tip when we were running this down and kind of cross comparing our inputs from the rest of the team, was now more than ever, your content, your messaging, it is your targeting. So honing that in, testing it, putting out different types of creatives, different types of videos, different backgrounds and settings, choosing different songs, different instrumentation, different ways of presenting yourself on camera, all of that stuff is really doing the heavy lifting that, your super niche targeting isn't there to do anymore. And I can't stress enough how important this is these days. Like I said, it's kind of separating like the macho from the minuscule, to use ungendered language. It really is putting us in a place where, you have to do work as an advertiser. It's not as easy, so to speak, as it used to be.
But I feel like as an artist, this is almost more encouraging for me to hear.
Yeah, it's true.
You know what I mean?
It's true.
Because like
unique advantage.
Right. Because now what I hear when it says, hey, your content and your promise that's what does the legwork. That's more encouraging than please sit down and list 20 bands that you sound like, and then please go and find these people and then create an audience for them and then do this and then do that, all within the ads manager.
And if it doesn't work, it's definitely the audiences, right?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. It's like, no, at this point, it's like the weight of your success is on the content. And so that's a little bit more daunting, right? Because as a marketer, it's easier to say, like, let me test these audiences. We can cycle through and find one that works well. But as an artist, it's like, oh, well, what do I have to do? What's my objective? It's like, make a cool video. And that's hard. Obviously, that's a hard task, but it's one that I think that creatives will connect with more closely than all the ads manager stuff that historically has been the path to success. Obviously, the video has always been important, but now it's like, you have a great video, you put it to your genre broad, like, it can go well for you. That's the extent of the advertising. So it's exciting and it's encouraging because you can really dial into the specific details, like you were saying, where, you used to be able to target a niche band. Well, now it's like, how do you work that into the video? How do you get creative with that?
Yeah, and I think that that's a great sort of segue into a tip that I had that I think is really helpful, and I don't know if enough artists know about it or think about it, but it's something that I see play out constantly at IndieX with a lot of the artists that we work with. And that is, if you see traction, this is related to TikTok ads in particular, but it also applies to Instagram, but specifically TikTok here. If you have traction on an organic post on TikTok, or if you have virality, if you have a viral post on TikTok, you should absolutely run Spark ads using that TikTok post. It is a super powerful way to take a post that has virality and traction and just throw gasoline on it. So many of our clients, will have me on standby essentially as they're running through their organic content strategy on TikTok. And if they have something go off, and usually we set like a number that's kind of, it varies from account to account, to be honest with you. But usually we have like a number that's like, hey, if a TikTok post goes past this certain ceiling, which is like higher than our average for our profile, then we will start running ads on it. And, we look at the comments that are happening, we look at the views that are happening on it, and the uses of the sound at the time. And then we kind of use that as a benchmark to say, okay, we should we should put money on this and we should run traffic on it, because that can just kind of get the snowball rolling down the hill and building up steam. So that's a tip that I think is really useful that a lot of people are not talking about. TikTok ads are still kind of a mystery in a lot of ways, how to use them effectively and what to do. And this is one that's really important to me because I think in a lot of other cases, you can end up wasting a lot of money on TikTok.
Yeah, for sure. And this tip combined with Jesse's tip from before, there's just this huge shift in mentality that I hope people are picking up on, and that we're doing a good job of underlining for you all. We're historically, like, even before TikTok was around, when 4 years or 5 years ago, whatever, marketing was in this place of like, let's craft a video, let's like put all of our eggs into this basket, let's run ads on it, and let's hope that those ads allow us to reach the right people. And that was really like how you got visibility. But what's great about the combination of your content is what matters. And if it goes viral, here's what you do: run ads. It gives you this, like, it gives me this mentality, even as I do this for myself, of like, all I got to do is try to make a video I think's great and make as many great videos as I think I can and post them. And you can try different things. And so I feel like I'm in this world of like, it does get frustrating, don't get me wrong, but of just cycling through and trying things and being like, oh, I think this could be cool. Oh, I saw this other artist did this. Let me try that. And especially on TikTok, you're just cycling through ideas and creative ways to present your music. And there's really no wrong answer. You're just trying, posting. Worst thing, it doesn't get views and like it disappears forever, And then what's encouraging about it is that you have the freedom to be creative and to do these things. And what Jack's saying is, if one of them catches on, then you just go, great, here's the power up, right? Like if this is Mario or whatever, you're giving the post the power up and you're just spending money on it to advertise it. So it's really taking the focus back to highlighting creativity and understanding, especially on the top of funnel level, understanding what tools you have in place: Facebook Ads Manager, TikTok Manager, but understanding those two things and some very, very basic campaigns, and then using them as leverage versus those being like the main driving on TikTok specifically. So it's encouraging to me.
I agree. I definitely think it's encouraging. And I want to take a quick second here to say TikTok ads, since we didn't touch on that super specifically earlier on in this episode, it might be overwhelming because maybe you're used to running Instagram and Facebook ads on the Meta platform, Meta Ads Manager. If you're feeling overwhelmed by TikTok, or if anything we just talked about sounds particularly scary, well, we go a bit more in depth in this inside the new Fan Finder method training inside of IndiePRO. So I'll make sure to link to IndiePRO in the show notes. If you're not a member of our community, you should definitely join. You can learn about running top of funnel ads, video ads like the ones that we've been talking about throughout this episode, and specifically the TikTok ads sort of approach that we just touched on is detailed a bit more heavily inside that training. So I definitely would recommend diving into it if you haven't already. It can be a really, really powerful resource for you. Now, the next thing I think is important for anyone to know when they're thinking about getting into running paid ads for their music on social media, and that is that you can't be afraid to fail. You have to be willing to test. And this was a point made from Joe, one of our IndieX account managers, strategists, and marketers here at the agency. And Joe was making a point to be willing to fail forward. You're going to have campaigns that aren't going to be solid. They're not going to work. You have to be patient and you have to be resilient. This was also a point that Jesse made. You have to be patient and you have to be willing to keep trying new things. Your first try is very, very unlikely to be the best campaign you've ever built. We have campaigns at the agency that fail for clients all the time. We run tests that don't work. We pivot and we make it right, and we start working towards something that will. This is how you learn. We did an episode a while back on higher level testing and how we test ideas, but here in this episode where we're just talking about running ads, we have ad copy that fails all the time, that just doesn't resonate. You kill the ad, you try something different. This is just part of the game, but I think a lot of people get freaked out, and it's like, oh, I just spent money and it didn't do the thing that I wanted it to do, so like never going back to that again. Facebook ads don't work for me, Instagram ads don't work for me, so on and so forth. And I think that developing a a bit thicker skin and some more risk tolerance is really, really beneficial and kind of necessary right now for running any kind of ads for your music.
Yeah. And I think, too, like a asterisk mark to this one is that if you're listening to this episode and you have been listening to episodes and you understand when we talk about, hey, campaign structure, and this will tie into the next point, too, about your goals, you have a pretty solid baseline of where to start. And so this isn't saying, like, don't be afraid to just start running conversion campaigns to get clicks over to TikTok, or or purchase campaigns to get clicks to TikTok. Like, if you're listening, if you've been in this system, if you've been in the community, you have a starting place, and from there, that's where you need to make sure you're not afraid to test from there. And this is not an easy thing to develop. This is one of the harder things because I think as artists, you're super sensitive to two things. One being the fact that, especially early on, you don't have budget to fail. You have very limited budget as is. Like the very first push we ever did, we had $2,500 total over the course of a couple months. And so every fail to me at that time felt like life or death. Like we just wasted $100 testing this.
Yeah.
It's like absolutely brutal. And so the way you can combat that is not be afraid to just not run things, but go on a smaller scale. If you spend $10, you can tell what the cost per click really is going to be. And so you can test things on a smaller scale. So it's like, okay, well, I tested $10. This didn't really get the cost per click that I was looking for. Let me try something else. And then you're just having smaller increments. So that's one thing to be aware of, is that like adjust your level of thick skin to accommodate the budget that you have available. There's no wrong budget. That's important to know as well. Obviously, bigger budgets over time will get bigger results, but a big budget only gets good results if it has the foundation of a good campaign. And the way I think about it is this, right? If you're averaging 10 cents per click and you have $100, I'm gonna have to get my calculator out because I'm not good at math that way. You're getting 1,000 clicks, right? So consider that a campaign that is getting 10 cents per click, spending $100 is going to get 1,000 clicks. If you're getting 75 cents per click and you got $100, you're getting 130 clicks. And so understanding and taking the time to spend that extra budget up front to really dial in whatever you're going after as the objective, and then scaling it and then spending more money on it is way better than saying, oh, I've got $1,000. I'm just going to dump it on this, and however it does, it does. We've seen that inside ad accounts that we've looked at, especially for large artists, that they just have so much money, they just spend and spend and spend. And that's a huge selling point at IndieX, is like, hey, if you gave us that budget, you'd have 5 times the number of clicks because we're going to take the time to figure it out and translate it. So don't be afraid to test, but and take the time to test, and be careful with your budget, but don't become paralyzed with like fear almost, if that's the right way to say it. And that's a very, very hard thing to learn to do, especially when it's your own money on the line. I totally feel that.
This is definitely more of an evergreen truth, I think, and a tip about advertising in general and marketing in general. Really, budgeting in your music business is how to develop like a risk tolerance and learn to create a process for spending money that drives you forward, even if there are bumps along the way and tests along the way and failures along the way.
Yeah, and I think this final tip from Jack, which is really smart and we'll get into, but this is a slightly different way of phrasing it, is that if you have the objective in mind, that allows the test to be way more palatable. And what I mean by that is that we still test stuff, right? Like me personally, we still test stuff, and we'll say, hey, can we try this video at $150, $250? Because we have that budget available to us currently. I'm spending that money, and we're spending that money looking for, does it get us the result that we want? Not, oh man, I can't lose this money, it better go well. Like we've budgeted, we know if we lost that money, we're okay. But if it goes well and it connects, then our objective, the thing we're aiming for, is going to pay off. And that's just how business works. And you have to understand what you're going after. So Jack, I'll let you introduce your last one, but I think it ties in very closely to that.
It totally does. My last tip is purely tactical, really, about advertising through Facebook and Instagram, Meta Ads Manager. A lot of people ask, if I'm trying to get opt-ins, should I optimize for what kind of pixel event? If I'm trying to get sales, what kind of pixel event should I be optimizing for? And it's a question that comes up a lot because back in the day, if you were trying to get leads, for example, and you didn't have a lot of data on your ad account, you might optimize for a step up, your landing page views or your view content. But now, especially starting out, I'll be totally honest with you, in most cases where I'm running ad accounts, the first thing that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to shoot for the optimization event that is my end goal. And like Ed was saying, this applies kind of high level to advertising as well, just from a strategy point. But at a very, very low tactical level, what I'm talking about here too is if you want to get email list subscribers, you optimize for leads. That's your optimization event when you're running Facebook and Instagram ads. If you're trying to get sales, shoot for sales, at least when you're starting out. Then if you want to roll back in the funnel a bit and try for a higher in the funnel optimization event, add to cart, view content, button click, wherever you might want to go with it higher up in the funnel, you can do that and you can test. But these days, I say shoot for the event that you want to aim for. And this is a question that I think comes up a lot. There's a lot of different information out there on it online if you're searching for any kind of advertising information. So this is one that I wanted to just kind of clarify, like what my stance and point of view on it as far as the things that I do day in, day out. And then I do hope that it helps from the standpoint of zooming out as well from a very, very high level strategic view. If you know what your end goal is, you can understand what kind of campaigns you should be running, what kind of content you should be using, and also how much money you should spend and how to test and not be so worried, like Ed was saying, about losing a certain amount of money. So two very different ideas, tactical and strategic, but I think the tip kind of applies to both of them in different ways, which is cool. I was not intending for that, but great point, Ed. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yes, it just dovetailed nicely. I think that I was just on the phone before this and I was telling somebody, I was like, look, at the end of the day, you need to have a plan and you need to try to execute that plan. But what Jack is getting at that's super important here is that you want your plan to make sense. You don't want to be having the wrong initial setup, then you're set up for failure. And so what Jack said is like, hey, if you want sales, optimize for purchases, right? If you want leads, optimize, or you want emails, optimize for leads. If you want to drive traffic over to Spotify, optimize for link clicks. Like these kind of things, knowing that basic information sets you up to test. Where it's like if your initial foundation is wrong and you're driving traffic to Spotify, optimizing for purchases, you already start off on the wrong foot. And so taking that time to make sure you're teed up so that all your testing can work and actually build, not just be total chaos. Such a great point. It's such a great mentality for marketing in general, but obviously for musicians.
I dig it. I think that tip is kind of a nice way to round off with something tactical and strategic. I hope you guys take these and can sort of break through some of the noise that's out there about advertising right now. Learn for some of the things that our team is doing day in, day out. And hopefully maybe they'll answer some of the questions that you might have had or some of the roadblocks or challenges that you might have been dealing with in advertising your own music. I hope you guys dug this. It was a lot of fun to kind of poll the team and get kind of their 1, 2, 3, 4 point ideas that they think were important to get out there and to talk about when it comes to advertising your music, depending on wherever you are, whether you're just starting out for the first time, or you've never run an ad, or you're someone who's been doing it forever and you've got a big fan base. I think all of these things apply in different ways to those different types of music marketers. So I hope you guys dug this. It was a lot of fun to run down here.
Absolutely. Glad we have so many smart people on the IndieX team.
Yeah, for sure. Special thanks to the IndieX team for sharing their tips and their experiences on the show. This was tons of fun. Obviously, we'll be having more of the team on the show coming up here throughout the rest of the year, trying to make that a point to bring the team onto the show and talk about the cool things that we get to do and the cool experiences that they're having, both with our clients and with our own music projects, which is a lot of fun. So I hope you guys dig that. If you're interested in working with us at IndieX, we'll leave a link to our IndieX application in the show notes. IndieX is our agency where we work one-on-one with artists and bands. If you've got a business that you've built around your music where you've got an audience built up and you're trying to tap into e-commerce revenue, we'd love to hear from you. That's really kind of our specialty, and what we do is help artists drive that revenue. And we'll wrap up this episode by saying we spend a lot of time on this show talking about getting your music out there and taking your message and bringing it to the masses through smart digital marketing. But something that we don't really talk about on this show very often is actually making that music and crafting the narrative and the processes that go into that. And I want to share with you guys a really great podcast that is going on, the newest season of The Record Process, which is a podcast by our good friend Casey Cavalier. The new episodes have been launching over the last few weeks, and they're really, really solid. They go into the process of making records. Casey has on artists, producers, engineers, and they talk about the process from the studio of making a great record and weaving a narrative into that record, and some cool stories about production and kind of the quirks and twists and turns that go on in making killer music and then bringing it into the world. So definitely check out the new season of The Record Process. It's a great show, and Casey's a good friend and has been on Creative Juice and brought his wisdom from his band and from his time as a producer. So definitely make sure you check it out if you want to get into the weeds and get nerdy. As a producer myself, I love getting into the heads of other producers and other artists and kind of how they hone in on their craft in the studio. And I know, Ed, you feel similarly as a songwriter.
Yeah, it's cool. I personally am going to check it out after this, but it's very interesting to have the side of, hey, here's how you get it out there, but understanding and how it comes together allows you to kind of get it out there in a way that's cool and unique. So I'm super interested to check it out.
For sure. Well, hope you guys dig these tips on advertising, and we'll see you guys next time on Creative Juice. Peace out, peace.